Kumihimo is the traditional Japanese art form of making braids and cords. It originated in Japan about 1200 years ago during the Nara period and can be seen being practiced by the Miyamizus in this scene. Here is the marudai, or the circular stand from where to begin threading. Here are the tama, or balls/weights to provide tension to allow threading. And here are the kumihimo threads featured so heavily throughout the movie of Kimi no Na wa. Threads are a highly recurring motif in the imagery and themes of Kimi no Na wa. The name of the town Itomori is written with the kanji ito, meaning thread, and mori, which means to guard or protect. And so the name Itomori can be roughly translated as to protect the threads. Because another major theme of Kimi no Na wa is preserving traditions. The duty of the Miyamizu family is to uphold the traditions and rituals of Itomori, from tying together kumihimo threads to performing the Kagura dance as Miko or shrine maidens during the Kuchikamizake ceremony. These are traditions that have existed ever since the founding of Itomori, and a source of conflict exists when Mitsuo's father chooses to stray from these traditions in his pursuit of politics. Even Mitsuo herself feels embarrassed for having to partake in these rituals, wishing to leave the rustic Itomori countryside for the glistening hubbub of Tokyo. But the film and Mitsuo's grandmother both assert the importance of maintaining these traditions, even if they don't really know why. The film takes note to mention that 200 years ago, there was the Great Fire of Mayagoro, destroying the original Itomori shrine in old documents, and thus the history and meaning of Itomori's festivals became unknown, and only the form lived on. This might just be a coincidence, but 200 years ago would be around the end of the Edo period of Japan, and right before the Meiji era. And the Meiji era of Japan is the era most specifically associated with Japan struggling to keep its traditions alive, to keep its cultural identity intact under the prevailing influence of Western culture. And similarly, the Miyamizu family also struggles to fulfill their ancestral duties during modern times. To discuss the actual meaning of these traditions, Itomori is a town situated by a massive crater that is revealed to have been formed by the impact of a comet, presumably the same comet which strikes Itomori in present day later in the film, Comet Tiamat. Comet Tiamat is mentioned in a newscast to have an orbital period of over 1200 years, meaning that the Miyamizu family has been preserving traditions for up to 1200 years, meaning it began squarely around the time that kumihimo and other traditions were introduced to Japan during the Nara period, or right before the Heian period, which is considered by many to be the golden age of classical Japan. Basically, if the length of 1200 years had any significance, it could be that it correlates with the length of all written history of Japan, which makes sense, as any written history of Miyamizu traditions could not have existed further back than this. Makoto Shinkai has also directly mentioned in interviews as taking some inspiration from various Heian-era writings, such as Tori Kaibaya Monogatari, a story about two siblings sharing mannerisms of the opposite sex, almost like body swapping, or a poem by the female poet Ono no Komachi, which goes like this. Omotsutsu nurabaya hito no metsuramu yume to shiriseba samazaramashi wo. While thinking about him, I slept, only to have him appear before me. Had I known it was a dream, I should never have awakened.
大事にしないよ。夢は目覚めればいつか消える。
Anyways, now that we understand how long the Miyamizu traditions have existed for, I want to take a step back and focus on why the film deliberately chose to mention the unknown meaning behind the Miyamizu traditions after the Great Fire of Mayagoro. There seems to be some sort of thematic significance to the act of carrying on traditions despite them losing their meaning, to the persistence of will despite the unknown. But what is it? A very literal answer to this question might be that the lost meaning of the traditions was to provide a warning against the second impact of the comet, and that, from a writer's perspective, keeping the meaning unknown allowed for dramatic tension and suspense before the big reveal of the two separate timelines and Itomori being destroyed by the comet. That would be a very pragmatic answer as to why the meaning was unknown. But I think the reasoning goes deeper than that. Why is it thematically important that the purpose of the traditions was unknown? To answer this question, I think we should investigate the opening and closing monologues of the movie. Once in a while, when I wake up, I find myself crying. The dream I must have had, I can never recall. But the sensation that I've lost something lingers for a long time after I wake up. I'm always searching for something, for someone. These are the opening lines of the movie, and these lines, I believe, represent the emotional core of the film, yet their meaning is intentionally vague. Right away, we should note the ambiguous tone of these lines. Lost something, searching for something, for someone. And the closing monologue of the movie also has the same ambiguous tone. Take note how the film carefully words the character's thoughts to imbue it with a sense of uncertainty. I'm always searching for something. This feeling has possessed me for some time. I'm not sure if I'm searching for a person or place, or if I'm just searching for a job. I feel like I'm always searching for something, for someone. The opening and closing monologues of Kimi no Na wa, in my opinion, represent the emotional core or the thematic anchors of the film. There's a reason why Makoto Shinkai chose to both open and close the movie with these monologues. And there's a reason why Makoto Shinkai chose to make these monologues vague. Between these two monologues, Kimi no Na wa is very concretely a movie about a boy and a girl who switch bodies across two different timelines, save their town from a comet, and fall in love while forgetting each other's names. But then, it opens and closes with these more introspective monologues that overtly don't really have anything to do with comets or time travel at all. Upon finishing the film, when we hear Mitsuha and Taki talk about looking for someone, we know they're talking about looking for each other, for the person they shared a body with in their dreams 8 years ago. But it's important to note how when the audience first hears the opening monologue for the first time, we have no idea what this monologue is actually referring to. We have no context as to who this someone or something might be. And even more importantly, neither do Mitsuha and Taki, as they have both completely lost their memory of these past events. The opening and closing monologues exist almost independently of the supernatural events which take up most of the movie, and so the headspace in which these monologues are uttered and meant to be consumed is not with relation to earlier events. They should instead be interpreted through the lens of a deeper, more universally profound meaning. The meaning of the Miyamizu family traditions are unknown, but after 200 years, they persist in upholding the rituals all the same. The meaning of this something or someone that is lost is unknown, but after 8 years, Mitsuha and Taki still feel an earnest yearning to search for it all the same. There is a consistent theme in not just Kimi no Na wa, but in all of Makoto Shinkai's filmography of characters being placed in circumstances that are so grand in scale over space and time that they are overwhelming beyond our understanding. And the feelings that persist in the face of these circumstances are often symbolic of a universal struggle that touches upon the core of the human condition. While you and I probably can't relate to swapping bodies with someone in our dreams and saving them from a comet, we can relate to loss. We can relate to yearning and desire. And how we interpret this with respect to the opening and closing monologues, though, is entirely up to us. One of the reasons that the opening and closing monologues are loosely defined with vague feelings and words is it allows the audience to self-insert our own reasoning into the unknowns and to fill it with our most personally affecting meaning. I think that one of the biggest reasons Kimi no Na wa leaves such an indelible impression upon viewers is that while it ostensibly is a story about comets and body swapping, I believe that in the back of our minds it draws upon our most intense emotions and intimate memories and then associates these feelings with breathtaking imagery and music, leading to a powerful viewing experience that perhaps initially we can't quite explain, but we know we very much enjoy.
とにかく楽しい 面白いエンターテインメントにしようっていうその一点でしたね。見終わった後にその理解できない部分があったとしてもわからないっていう印象が先に立つんじゃなくて、わかんないけどものすごい面白かった。
When I first watched Kimi no Na wa many years ago, I liked it a lot. I liked it enough to write a really long essay about it almost 7 years after watching it. But when I first watched it, I think my impression of the movie was that it was an extremely gorgeous looking film with an equally mesmerizing soundtrack. But I didn't really know what to say beyond that. I wasn't quite sure what the overall message of the film was. I had no idea what the lyrics of the song were even about. But the beautiful and evocative imagery and sounds stirred up emotions inside me that made me feel connected with the characters and story on a soulful level, even though I couldn't really explain what that really meant. Well, with this essay, I want to try to explain exactly and excruciatingly comprehensively what those feelings meant, and how Makoto Shinkai purposely meant to bring them about. When I talked about how the ambiguity of the opening and closing monologues allows for audiences to self-insert their own meaning, I think a very probable contender for this meaning is the topic of romantic love. While we can't relate to losing our memory of somebody from a comet, we could probably relate to the concept of losing a connection with someone we once held dear, and we can probably relate to waking up years later and still feeling like a part of ourselves is missing, even if we haven't talked to this other person for years because they were that important a part of our lives. While Kimi no Na wa isn't really explicitly about heartbreak or losing love in this type of way, the way the monologues are more abstractly worded allows us to interpret it in a way so as to make it more personally relatable and meaningful. And this especially makes sense when taking into consideration Makoto Shinkai's entire filmography, as nearly all of his previous films before this have had some sort of tragic take on love and its loss over various obstacles like distance and time. And in my opinion, Kimi no Na wa represents a natural progression of Makoto Shinkai's thoughts on love and relationships evolving throughout his movies, and later in this essay I would like to point out the many common themes and plot devices in all his films, and how they transformed with Kimi no Na wa. But this loss also doesn't have to be interpreted as a romantic loss either. Kimi no Na wa has also been interpreted as a reaction to the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami and the tragic loss of life in natural disasters. When Mitsuha and Taki talk about losing something, I believe this something can be interpreted in several different ways. The loss of a relationship, the loss of life, the loss of cultural traditions, the loss of something beautiful. Kimi no Na wa is an achingly beautiful movie. But the great tragedy of Kimi no Na wa and many of Makoto Shinkai's films is that the most beautiful things in life are oftentimes also the most fragile. The most beautiful, most precious things are the most carefully crafted, the most rarely attained, or they just possess some innate quality that inexplicably and inextricably ties ourselves to it, and thus we can't afford to lose it. But the pain that Mitsuha and Taki feel when they wake up and find themselves crying is exactly what happens when we lose it. When we lose something beautiful. Beauty. I believe that at the fundamental core of Kimi no Na wa, at the heart of the film, is an ode to beauty, a reverence for beauty. Kimi no Na wa is a movie about beauty, about how desperately we wish to protect and cherish this beauty, the unbearable ache that follows when we lose this beauty. And it's about searching tirelessly, aimlessly, triumphantly, searching to find this beauty again somewhere, anywhere in this world. Because as fragile as beauty is, nothing inspires us and takes hold of our hearts as strongly as beauty. When Taki meets Mitsuha at the edge of the crater and sees her smile against the dim, crepuscular beams of twilight, when both of them stare, transfixed in awe at Comet Tiamat passing overhead and miraculously splitting in a once-in-a-lifetime event, When we, the audience, first watched these scenes when we saw Kimi no Na wa for the very first time, who knows how many years ago. There is nothing more precious and inspiring than this moment, and there's nothing we want more than for this memory to last beyond the brief moment it does. At the very beginning of this essay, I talked about how threads are one of the main motifs of Kimi no Na wa, and I personally believe that threads are also a great metaphor for beauty. There is an artistry to be appreciated in how kumihimo threads are made. The braided cord Taki and Mitsuha share is reminiscent of the red thread of fate, a common East Asian belief that two destined lovers will be tied together by an invisible red thread that progressively draws them closer together until they one day finally meet. And this implies a precarious relationship because threads can be perhaps some of the flimsiest, most fragile materials in the world, because threads can be quickly snipped apart. But at the same time, while threads can be easily cut apart, when held from two ends and pulled in opposite directions, tensile strength allows threads to become the most resilient things in the universe, and can be stretched across even all the dimensions connecting people over space and time. Threads, like beauty, are simultaneously both frighteningly fragile, yet also awe-inspiringly powerful at the same time. In fact, thinking about the origin of the word thread, it is interesting how many words with many different meanings can all derive from the same Latin root ten, which means to stretch or hold like threads. On one hand, you have tentative, tenebrous, or tenuous, which indicate a sort of weakness or a lack of firmness. But then, on the other hand, you have tension, tenet, or tenacious, which indicate the exact opposite. So, when I call something tenuous, I don't want people to immediately assume that I'm making note of only its fragility. A fragility which, as the town name Itamori indicates, should be protected. I want to instead also highlight a hidden, more resilient underlying quality found in tenuity. A quality that has the power to stretch across all the dimensions and has resolutely inspired millions of lovers, artists, and privileged viewers such as myself. Such is the tenuity of beauty.
ああこのまま僕たちの声が世界の端っこまで消えることなく届いたりしたらいいのになそしたらね二人でどんな言葉を放とう消えることない約束お二人でせーので
The title of the opening song of the movie is Yumetoro, or Dream Lantern. But curiously, neither the words dream or lantern appear at all in the lyrics of the song. They don't appear in the English translation, and the phrases yume or toro also don't appear at all in the Japanese translation either. So why is the title of the song Dream Lantern? In Makoto Shinkai's first feature-length film, The Place Promised in Our Early Days, scientists in the movie propose an idea that perhaps the universe, just like humans, is capable of having dreams, and that these dreams manifest themselves as parallel universes and timelines. This is an entertaining hypothesis because dreams and parallel universes are similar in that they are both alternate forms of reality, but also the theoretical nature of parallel worlds and the often incomprehensible nature of dreams allows them to both share a sort of mysticism that we often don't quite understand, and I believe Makoto Shinkai purposely utilizes this gray area of difficult understanding to tie the two concepts together. 12 years after directing The Place Promised in Our Early Days, Shinkai revisits the same idea of entangling dreams and parallel worlds together in Kimi no Na wa, because Taki and Mitsuha exist on two separate timelines which they visit in their dreams. Dreams are popular narrative devices because they represent a state of mind that is within our reality, but at the same time is also quite different from our reality. This quasi-state of semi-reality often allows writers like Makoto Shinkai to use dreams as an in-between state between our reality and more otherworldly, supernatural, or spiritual forms of reality. It's the same reason why Twilight is also used so prominently in Kimi no Na wa. Twilight is an in-between state that is neither night nor day, and is thus another perfect metaphor for this intermediary through which we can touch upon and enter the spiritual world, while still being in the real world. Even the Japanese word used for twilight itself has a dimorphous state of being. In Japanese, twilight is written with these kanji and is pronounced as tasokare. But a more archaic kanji spelling of twilight would be like this, also pronounced tasokare. But instead of just being translated as twilight, this form of tasokare can also be translated as who is that? And this is especially interesting given Kimi no Na wa's central themes around names and identity, which might lead us to believe that Makoto Shinkai chose to use twilight as a motif after studying older Japanese phrases, which also makes sense given the integral role history and traditions across time seem to play in Kimi no Na wa. In fact, it is believed that twilight and who is that share a common spelling because during the onset of twilight, when light begins to fade into dusk, or conversely, when light is just beginning to emanate into dawn, during this transitional period, it might be difficult to make out the countenance of someone's face whose shape you might be able to make out but can't see entirely clearly. And so when it is difficult to recognize someone's face in twilight, you might ask, who is that? Another way to spell or write out who is that in Japanese is with these kanji, which can be pronounced as kawatare. And given Twilight's existing association with the question, who is that? It is from this variant, kawatare, that Makoto Shinkai introduces his own made-up word for Twilight, kataware, spelled with hiragana instead of kanji because it's a made-up word, and in the lore of the movie is explained as part of an archaic local Itomori dialect. It's interesting how a word can have two different identities, much like how Taki and Mitsuha share two different identities in the same body throughout the movie. It makes you think, what does the question, who are you, really mean? In Kimi no Na wa, there is certainly some sort of supernatural power at work that allows Taki and Mitsuha to switch places in their dreams. But I do enjoy the fact that this power is never given any name or form, and that its presence can only be felt in the naturally occurring mediums of dreams and twilight. It makes the film feel more believable, and also by keeping the details of these external supernatural forces to a minimum, it lends more weight to the actions and decisions of our characters. Because the focus of the movie shouldn't be on how magic time travel gods can save the day, but instead on the human connection between Taki and Mitsuha. Human. I personally think it is important that the more unintelligible, more intangible, inhuman forces of this movie should remain nameless. And when thinking about whoever or whatever is controlling these forces, asking the question, who are you, should have no clear answer. Clearly, in a movie titled Your Name, names will be important. But I think the precious qualities of names and identity should be reserved for the individuals who bear it. As for why I think that, I think it's important to investigate Makoto Shinkai's intimate relation with existential apprehensions about our place in the universe. Many of Makoto Shinkai's movies share an inquisitiveness about our place in the universe, or more particularly, our place within the dimensions that define our universe. And Shinkai uses the indefinite scale of these confines to symbolize the grandeur of his prose and the human experiences he wants to portray. Because what grander stage can we express our feelings on than all of space and time? The imagery of threads is inherent to space and time. Grandma Miyamizu says rather directly in the movie that the braided cords that we make are the god's art and represent the flow of time itself. And she is referring to the kumihimo threads mentioned at the beginning of this essay. Traditionally, we would think of time as flowing through a singular line, but if we think of multiple threads tying together like multiple timelines, of knotting together like Musubi. Musubi, which translates as knot in Japanese, is a major theme of Kimi no Na wa. It is believed to derive from whatever powers that guide many of the events of the film, and is described by Grandma Miyamizu as Musubi is the old way of calling the local guardian god. This word has profound meaning. Tying thread is Musubi. Connecting people is Musubi. The flow of time is Musubi. These are all the gods' power. They converge and take shape. They twist, tangle, sometimes unravel, break, then connect again. Musubi. Knotting. That's time. It is quite unclear as to what Musubi actually means. Like, what the heck does it mean for something to be time? The words used to describe Musubi are quite abstract, and I believe it is because Makoto Shinkai is intentional in wanting to evoke primarily an emotional response from the audience when thinking about Musubi, rather than give a literal evaluation. It would probably be too difficult for Makoto Shinkai, Grandma Miyamizu, or anybody to concretely define what Musubi actually is, and to do so might even lessen its power, since, similar to the ambiguity of the opening and closing monologues, the vagueness of Musubi allows the audience to fill in the unknown with their most personally affecting meaning. If I had to describe how I envision Musubi, I believe Musubi represents something grand in scope beyond our understanding, but it also represents how, on a fundamental level, people can be connected, even if they are on different timelines, even if they are separated by the furthest reaches of space. There is still an underlying fragility since threads can still unravel and break, but even so, humans can still be connected on a fundamental level under even the most dire conditions through this perhaps spiritual bond that is represented by Musubi. And while it is difficult to explain what this bond actually is or how it works, maybe it represents the prevalence of emotions over parameters of the universe. Regardless of what it actually is, it does explain how, despite a preponderance of odds, Taki and Mitsuha are able to find each other at the end of the movie, because they were still connected by Musubi. But yes, Musubi are a core element in Kimi no Na wa's themes. They represent some greater meaning Makoto Shinkai wants to explore regarding the connection and separation and then possible reconnection of people. And it is also important to study the context of this meaning with respect to space and time. Kimi no Na wa, like several of Makoto Shinkai's movies before it, has a fixation on space and time. Each of the 4 Radwimps songs in Kimi no Na wa contains numerous references to cosmically large measures of space and time. The contrast in scale between the vastness of the cosmos, of the unverifiability of the infinite unknown, of the theoretical existence of incomprehensible systems beyond our understanding, the contrast between all that and our own tiny selves simultaneously conveys both a mortal helplessness we must feel within this paradigm and the courage it must take to defy against it. Makoto Shinkai's fascination with the cosmos goes as far back as 2002 with his first major short film, Voices of a Distant Star, which is a story about a boy and a girl who try to maintain a relationship while being separated by literal light years. And perhaps most famously, the dimensions of space and time are most visibly at the forefront of his 2008 film, 5 centimeters per second. It is possible that Makoto Shinkai might have taken inspiration from the traditions from various festivals in Japan concerned with spatial elements. The first is Tsukimi, which is the Japanese version of the more broadly East Asian Mid-Autumn Festival, just like how the festival celebrated by Itamori and Kimi no Na wa takes place during the autumn. Tsukimi dates back to the Heian era, much like other traditions mentioned in this essay, and is historically a moon viewing festival, although in Kimi no Na wa, the residents of Itamori are viewing a comet. But the second festival I want to mention that more pertinently has to do with Makoto Shinkai's predilection for celestial beings, and I believe has had a major influence on Kimi no Na wa, is the Tanabata Festival. The Tanabata Festival is a summer festival, sometimes called the Star Festival, and it celebrates the legend of Orihime and Hikaboshi, who are star-crossed lovers tragically separated by the entirety of the Milky Way galaxy. And much like how Taki and Mitsuha are only able to see each other during a tiny sliver of time during Twilight, Orihime and Hikaboshi can only meet once a year on the 7th day of the 7th month of the Japanese lunisolar calendar, which is when Tanabata is celebrated. Orihime and Hikaboshi are quite literally star-crossed lovers because they are represented by 2 stars, Vega, and Altair, which are part of the famous summer triangle of stars, with the third star Deneb representing the bridge over which the two lovers can meet once a year. This is why Tanabata is sometimes also referred to as Hoshi Matsuri, or the Star Festival. Much like the characters of Voices of a Distant Star and 5 centimeters per second, Orihime and Hikoboshi are separated by an agonizing, tantalizing distance, while the characters of Kimi no Na wa are separated by the dimension of time. But also, it's especially interesting to note how the name of the female lover in the Tanabata Festival legend, Orihime, can translate to weaving princess, because in the legend, Orihime was a woman who wove together many threads, just like the threads so prominently used in Kimi no Na wa, threads that can possibly just maybe connect across the vast expanse of the entire Milky Way. In fact, Hikoboshi, the other lover in this story, was known as a cowherd, and his cows are said to have wandered all across the Milky Way. And that's a whole lot of cows! And cows make milk! Anyways, going back to our conversation on dimensions, I believe that Makoto Shinkai has a fascination with distance and time because, as dimensional units, they are fundamental fixtures of the universe that we must inevitably learn to live with or work against. And because they are such basic measures of our reality, they're the easiest ways through which we can view our reality on the farthest, most widely encompassing scale. And I believe Makoto Shinkai wishes to tell his stories at this scale because, just like our ancestors when they looked up at the sprawling night sky full of stars thousands of years ago, the same night sky we see today, just like traditions of years past, Makoto Shinkai wants to tell a story of the largest canvas of possibility we can see, and in doing so, draw forth the most enduring trace of human nature that can still exist, even if just faintly, at this most superlative plane of existence conceivable. Is there any facet of the totality of human experience that can withstand the vastness of the cosmos? Is there any quality of humanity that, no matter how infinitesimally small, can give significance to our place amongst the millions of galaxies that surround us? What meaning is there to human existence such that it can stand alongside space and time as irrefutable fixtures of the universe? Makoto Shinkai actually tackles these questions quite directly with his first major short film, Voices of a Distant Star, which I've mentioned is a story about a boy and a girl who try to maintain a relationship while being light years apart. The girl, named Mika, has been deployed on an intergalactic mission and tries to exchange messages with a boy named Noboru, who is still on Earth, through text messages. But eventually, being light years apart, the messages take increasingly longer intervals of time to send, from several months to several years. It poses an interesting question in that, when separated between the farthest reaches of the universe, what significance can there be to a single relationship between a boy and girl? And why would there be any purpose in waiting on, in crying over, and in desiring deeply and achingly for this other person who should be cosmically meaningless? At the very end of Voices of a Distant Star, using a narrative structure very reminiscent of Kimi no Na wa, the two main characters end the film with a monologue, and they ask each other the most important question of the film. We are far, far, very, very far apart, but it might be that thoughts can overcome time and distance. If for even one instant something like that could happen, what would I think? And they both answer the question with Koko ni iru yo, or I am here. Identity. In my opinion, I think what sets humanity apart from the rest of the cosmos is our ability to give ourselves and the things we observe an identity, and consequently give a meaning to the place and time we are in right here, right now. When Mika and Noboru, the characters of Voices of a Distant Star, wish to say, I am here, they want to assert that they, Mika and Noboru, are at a certain point in time and space. Not anyone else, not the planets or stars that surround them. They alone are at that point, and they can be seen, they can be found, they can be loved, and it is important that only they are there and nobody else, because only Mika is Mika, and only Noboru is Noboru. And even when existing on different timelines, only Mitsuha is Mitsuha, and only Taki is Taki. Even though Mitsuha and Taki should be cosmically insignificant when compared to the rest of the universe, there is only one Mitsuha and one Taki like them in the entire universe. And so there's nothing wrong with wanting only that one person. Identity is not reserved strictly to personhood though. Every day, everywhere, we unconsciously imprint an identity onto everything we observe. The phones in our hands, the cities we live in, the words we speak. These all have an identity that is irreplaceable once fixated to a certain place and time. Like, take even something as inconsequential as this moment of you watching this YouTube video at whatever time and whichever place you're watching it. Nothing can change that you watch this video at this time and this place in the omnipresent plane of cosmic events. The casual and causal act of observation converts unknown entities into familiar identities. And on the dimensional planes of time and space, generating identity allows us to create distinguishable points from which we can meaningfully reference other points within the planes, and then form relationships between said points. Without identity, we would be unable to label any points on our graph, and then the universe would really be empty, void, and meaningless. And identity is a uniquely human concept, or more generally, a concept associated with all sentient thought. Planets and stars, to our knowledge, do not have any awareness of space or time or identity because they do not have thought. They simply exist. They don't know where they are in space or when they are in time because they don't have a concept of they to begin with. The stars of the universe twinkle thoughtlessly, fast asleep. But humanity, life, is the first instance that we know of something awakening in our perpetually dreaming universe, possessing the cognizance to identify things we observe, and then use that ability to situate ourselves within the universe, and just also make use of a revolutionary concept, which is a sense of self to place in the universe to begin with. Whether or not this act of being able to meaningfully identify and define things in the universe is actually meaningful in an even broader sense is beyond my capacity to explain, but it is undeniable that this concept of identity is one of humanity's most basic, distinctive, and enduring contributions to the universe, which is why your name is so important. Your name is the most succinct representation of your identity, which I've taken fastidious care to methodically over-explain over the past 5 minutes about why I think identity can be a fundamental human fixture of reality alongside space and time. When sharing bodies or possessing a physical form that is not originally their own, the only thing that gives Taki and Mitsuha distinguishable identities in this shared body is their names. And so holding on to your own name should be a precious experience to maintain your identity in space and time. But learning someone else's name should also be a precious experience because it can be the first step to tying yourself to someone at a point in space and time. As the dual nature of Tasokare implies, who are you is a delicately intricate question, and it also carries a deeply mystifying philosophical weight when trying to consider identity and what it means with respect to the rest of the universe. It almost hurts our heads to try and think about who are we while looking up at the stars so far beyond our reach. Earlier in this essay, I talked about how without identity, all of space-time would be empty and meaningless. But suppose there existed only one single point of identity in all of space-time, and that no other points of identity existed. From the perspective of that one point, with no other points to reference or observe, the rest of the universe would still be completely indistinguishable and just as empty and meaningless as before. This is where I want to point out that the title of the movie isn't just Name, it's Your Name. In fact, if we wanted to look at the original Japanese title of Kimi no Na wa, a more accurate English translation of the title should not be Your Name, but instead, Your Name? Because the original phrasing of Kimi no Na wa is actually shorthand for Kimi no Namae wa, which will more directly translate to what is your name? But Kimi no Na wa is just shorter and catchier. And similarly, what is your name or your name wouldn't sound as good as an English title either, but na and namae can actually be used interchangeably for the English word name, and also the presence of the wa character at the end is a grammatical particle that could roughly be translated as is, or expecting to relate something pertaining to the subject of the phrase, which is kimi no na, or your name. If the kimi no na wa really wanted to be directly translated as just your name, it might have been better to name the film as just Kimi no na, or Kimi no namae, but that just sounds funny, and so I think it was actually important that the title of the film was supposed to be read as a question. Tasokare, who are you? What is your name? What isn't so important is our own names, but the names of the other people we meet, and to whom we can give meaning and receive meaning from in this absurd, bewildering, and mystifying universe. And so asking for someone's name is the crucial first step towards demystifying our universe. Your name is the pivotal element that intersects the dimensions which Makoto Shinkai loves to write so much about. But your name is also the pivotal element intersecting yourself and all the people you will ever meet and know in your life. Your name is incredibly important. Like Taki closing his eyes and uttering Mitsuha's name to himself over and over again under the escaping twilight, your name can bring solace and clarity during times of duress. And so, your name should be cherished and protected. Because the most beautiful, most wonderful, and powerful memories you will ever make will be intertwined into this name. And these memories and emotions must also be protected because they can be easily lost. Because your name can be easily forgotten. Names and identities are simultaneously important, profound, and fragile things all at the same time. It's a rather tenuous concept, if you ask me. Quite a while ago, I asked, why is Yume Toro called Dream Lantern, despite never mentioning dream or lantern in its lyrics? One possible interpretation for what a lantern might mean in this context is that the song is about trying to reach someone from whom we have been separated, and thus we might be able to relate the Japanese word for lantern, toro, to Toro Nagashi, a ceremony that is part of the Obon Festival, another summer festival in Japan which lights lanterns to help guide the spirits of the dead. As we know by now, Kimi no Na wa has an interwoven relationship with cultural festivals and traditions, but Kimi no Na wa has also been popularly interpreted as a reaction to the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, and the tragic loss of life in natural disasters. In fact, the crater of Itamori has been said to be inspired by a real-life crater from a Japanese island called Aogashima, whose crater was formed not by a comet, but by two overlapping volcanoes. And Aogashima was the site of a horrific natural disaster when a volcanic eruption wiped out nearly half of its population in 1785. But the most famous natural disaster associated with Kimi no Na wa would be the 2011 Tohoku earthquake. And Makoto Shinkai has actually spoken directly about this relation, mentioning in an interview about how he was also inspired by an earthquake that occurred over 1,000 years prior to the Tohoku earthquake. It was one of the largest earthquakes ever recorded in Japan until the 2011 quake. The earthquake Makoto Shinkai is referring to is most likely the Jogan earthquake of 869, which also caused a tsunami and also occurred in the exact same Tohoku region as the 2011 earthquake, and also occurred almost 1,200 years prior, just like the cycle of Comet Tiamat. I believe that Makoto Shinkai was inspired by what he saw as a poetic symmetry in history, as the mighty, inevitable pendulum of time swings back and forth, each time putting on a great show of devastating strength that nature and the universe hold over us. How is humanity collectively supposed to act in this situation? Kimi no Na wa can be read as a mourning piece for the dead, as trying to guide our feelings regarding the dead, but curiously, it also tries to revive the dead. Kimi no Na wa isn't the first Makoto Shinkai movie that deals with trying to revive the dead. Much of his 2011 film, Children Who Chase Lost Voices, is about a grieving man traveling to the underworld looking for a way to revive his dead wife, and is willing to perform any drastic measures necessary. Unfortunately, he does not succeed. But what I find interesting is that the movie makes reference to the Japanese tale which I think also had an influence on Kimi no Na wa, the tale of Izanagi and Izanami. In this Japanese Shinto legend, Izanagi and Izanami are Japanese deities who are credited with creating Japan and giving birth to many other deities, like Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo. Besides having major influence on Sharingan powers in Naruto, Izanagi and Izanami are also associated with a story involving death and the underworld. In this story, Izanami, the wife of Izanagi, has died and passed on to Yomi, or the Shinto version of the underworld. And so Izanagi, ever the faithful lover, follows his wife to the underworld and begs her to return with him to the land of the living. And Izanami agrees, but on one condition, warning him that he must not look upon her body, which he agrees to, but eventually becoming impatient, he at one point lights a torch and looks upon her. And to his horror, her body has become grotesquely decomposed, and out of fear, Izanagi ran out of the underworld and lost his wife forever. If this tale sounds familiar, that's because it's almost identical to the perhaps more famous Western version of this story, which is the Greek tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice. Some of us are probably already familiar with the Greek legend of Orpheus traveling to Hades to bring his wife Eurydice back to life. It was also told he can only do so on the condition that he not turn back and look upon Eurydice's body until reaching the overworld. And Orpheus almost succeeds, but just as he exits into the land of the living, he cannot contain his excitement and turns back to gaze upon his wife and admire her beauty. And unfortunately, she was still in the underworld in the moment of his sweet, ill-fated gaze, and thus she became lost to him forever. It is definitely interesting how such similar stories can take root in two different civilizations thousands of years ago on different sides of the globe, almost suggesting a universal truth, a shared experience amongst cultures with regards to the ephemerality of love and the tragedy and beauty in its loss. Something about how, while love and life may be tenuous, their tales will endure for generations. Also, very tangentially related, but I previously mentioned that the Tanabata Festival involves the summer triangle of stars, which includes Vega, a star which is part of the constellation of Lyra, a constellation which represents a musical instrument called the lyre, an instrument that belonged to Orpheus. Everything's connected. It's all tying together. Jokes aside, I do think the legends of Izanagi and Izanami, of Orpheus and Eurydice, all have a presence in Kimi no Na wa. In Kimi no Na wa, the area within the crater of the first comet impact where Miyamizu's shrine lies is referred to as Kakuryo, or the underworld. And when Taki visits the shrine near the film's climax, he is said to be entering the underworld. And just like Orpheus and Izanagi before him, he is entering the underworld with the intention of bringing the girl he loves back to life. The first time the Kakuryo is mentioned, Grandma Miyamizu tells Taki that upon entering the underworld, in order to return to the natural world, one must exchange and leave behind that which is most important to you. The first time Taki visits the shrine while in Mitsuha's body, he leaves behind the Kuchikamizake, which itself is supposed to represent the other half of Mitsuha, because it was said during the Kuchikamizake ceremony Mitsuha performed in that she had split her soul in two, leaving her other half inside this drink. The night of that performance was also the night she began switching bodies with Taki, because sharing a body symbolizes the split soul she had made. And when Taki returns to the shrine a second time, drinking the Kuchikamizake to briefly reunite with Mitsuha, he once again must leave behind that which is most important to him. And just like Orpheus and Izanagi before him, Taki leaves behind Mitsuha, losing his memory of her. In fact, during this scene, I thought about how, when Orpheus tried to receive Eurydice from Hades, how he couldn't resist succumbing to his desire for Eurydice's beauty and turned around to see her face, messing up at the last possible moment and separating them forever. And in a similar manner, Taki couldn't help but give in to Mitsuha's precious smile in Twilight, and instead of first writing his name on her hand as he should have, the first thing he wrote was, "I love you," just before he disappeared, and thus possibly preventing them from ever meeting again. It was a romantic gesture, but a tragic mistake at the same time. Although, the film does imply that the power of this statement, of this beauty, is what compels Mitsuha and motivates her to push towards the final stretch of saving Itomori. But, yeah, Kimi no Na wa doesn't completely follow these legends of Orpheus and Eurydice or Izanagi and Izanami, and in fact subverts not just these legends, but also Makoto Shinkai's previous film Children Who Chase Lost Voices before it, because Mitsuha does come back to life, and so does the town of Itamori. But why? Why does Makoto Shinkai suddenly deviate from the course of his predecessors, from the precedents shown in time? To answer this, there is one last film I would like to analyze with respect to how it represents the evolution of Makoto Shinkai's philosophies on love and the universe before Kimi no Na wa. In my opinion, it would be impossible to present a complete analysis of Kimi no Na wa without mentioning Makoto Shinkai's arguably most famous film before it, 5 centimeters per second. 5 centimeters per second is a marvelous, flawed, yet also beautifully drawn film whose themes and earnest pains can still be felt in Kimi no Na wa. The two films complement each other in terms of shared trauma and sentimentalities, and an emerging essence of Kimi no Na wa can be seen in several key scenes of 5 centimeters per second. My favorite sequence of 5 centimeters per second occurs during the first act of the film, when the young male protagonist, Takaki, boards a train on a cold winter night in hopes of later meeting his friend, Akari. Makoto Shinkai illustrates this opening scene beautifully, making heavy use of flecks of snow and flickering lights, and then populating this atmosphere with detailed reproductions of Tokyo transit procedures and closely observed glistening metallic surfaces. Makoto Shinkai manages to make an ordinary train ride memorable with his photorealistic imagery. I believe that Makoto Shinkai holds a special regard for even mundane things like public infrastructure, and he uses close-up shots of metal rail bars and overhead light fixtures or the rattling of the iron footboards connecting train cars because it almost feels like we are viewing the memory of an actual real-life commute Makoto Shinkai himself once took on a train, which he then replicated for this movie. And this results in a more personal and thus more meaningful viewing experience for the audience, feeling almost nostalgic, even if we might never have ridden a train in Japan before. Makoto Shinkai's attentive and keen eye towards infrastructure extends to his other movies, including Kimi no Na wa, witnessed in how faithfully he reconstructs Tokyo in his movies. When Mitsuha steps into Tokyo for the first time, the awe she feels mirrors what we might also feel as the audience, as we alongside Mitsuha become immersed into the city, a city which Makoto Shinkai has clearly walked through many times himself before. The depiction of real-life Tokyo landmarks gives a sense of familiarity, but the glow of morning light and the spotless sheens of glass windows and metallic surfaces creates a cleaner, brighter rendition of Tokyo that an enthusiastic young countryside girl like Mitsuha would envision, or that an audience member who has never been to Tokyo might envision. The meticulous detail in Makoto Shinkai's drawings helps preserve a snapshot of the reality he once lived in, but the choices in his art direction do more than just preserve that reality. They help transform the artist's memory into something far more beautiful than what reality could ever hope to be.
世界観みたいなものがこういうお化粧で随分変わってくると思います。それを一律にやるわけではなくて、その絵の部分部分でどうすれば世界がより美しく見えるかっていうのを考えてやっていく。
Going back to the opening train scene of 5 centimeters per second, I mainly believe this scene is pertinent to Kimi no Na wa due to how deftly it introduces Makoto Shinkai's contemplations on the dimensions, taking things that can exist on a grander cosmic scale but instead fostering them in a more intimate setting of a boy riding on a train to see a girl. First, there's the established goal of Takaki wanting to see Akari, from whom he has been separated by both distance and time, since Takaki has not seen Akari for over a year ever since she moved from Tokyo to the Tochigi prefecture. And thus Takaki boarding a train to see Akari is attempting to close both these measures of distance and time. Trains are repeatedly used as metaphors in Makoto Shinkai's films, as purveyors of distance over time, and also as points of intersecting arrivals and departures. And in this opening scene of 5 centimeters per second, the train alone controls the dimensions held over Takaki, It is the lone arbiter that determines whether Takagi may achieve his goal, controlling both his place in the universe in relation to his goal and the amount of time it will take to reach that goal. Because of this, the train can be seen as the sole representation of a greater system that confines not only Takagi, but many other characters in Makoto Shinkai's films. And the effects of the confines of the system, of the universe, are demonstrated in the profound helplessness Takagi feels during his journey. The narration takes note to mention that this is the first time Takagi has ever gone to Shinjuku Station or ridden these trains by himself, inviting the audience to remind ourselves what it was once like to be an adolescent. Pretty much all of Makoto Shinkai's movies involve youths or adolescents, and maybe it's because they're the most profitable target audience, or maybe it's because Makoto Shinkai can be criticized as having views on romantic relationships that might have never progressed beyond those of an overly idealistic teenager. But I do think Makoto Shinkai chooses to write stories about young people because experiences like a first Tokyo train ride, sitting in the passenger cars, and the anticipation of meeting a girl you like, these all become more sensory and vividly rich when told from the perspective of our youth. And so, adolescence is a period of time when beauty is much more acutely affecting. We become much more sensitive to it, and it is more impressionable due to its novelty, but also more disarming due to its unfamiliarity. Takagi cares deeply for Akari, and he doesn't want to lose Akari. But during his train ride, he becomes occupied with a recollection of regret, a phone call when he was unable to help Akari during a moment of distress. He felt there was nothing he could do due to their separation. Takagi feels frustrated at this separation, which represented a factor of his situation over which he had no control. And fear is a primal response to lack of control. Humans have a natural tendency to gravitate towards familiar environments as a means of self-preservation. We want to be able to easily predict and rationalize our general situations because only then can we feel assured in autonomy over ourselves and the things we cherish. But the hard reality of life, and perhaps the thesis of 5 centimeters per second as a film, is that it is impossible for any one person to fully control the overall system. And distance and time represent parameters of this overarching system that are beyond our control. And just as little control as we have over the distance separating even the furthest galaxies, we must also accept the fact that we have no control on the inevitable distance between hearts. We can't control how another person feels and how this distance grows with time. Makoto Shinkai makes numerous references to time during Takagi's train ride. The continual intercom messages keep announcing further delays of time, and the repeated close-up shots of Takagi's watch signify the increasing passage of time. And the intent of these references is to emphasize the relentless, unwavering control time has over Takagi's goal. Takagi is restricted from meeting Akari due to distance and time, and so Takagi sitting alone on the train, fully at its mercy, is almost representative of how humanity as a whole is often adrift, prone to the whims of the universe. And the many shots of birds in 5 centimeters per second represent a sort of blissful desire to somehow be free of this overwhelming burden, because this precarious existential dread weighs threateningly over Takagi throughout his journey, dissuading his confidence and instilling his worst anxieties. And these emotions begin to swell and overflow in the first act of 5 centimeters per second when the wheels of the train suddenly stutter to a shuddering, shivering halt in the wintry night. The iron squeals a whisper into the billows of an endlessly barren snowfield. It is at this point of perfect, frozen silence, when distance and time have both come to a complete standstill, that Takagi breaks and gives into despair, begging for Akari to go home and not wait for him any longer. Takagi voicing his frustrations with the dimensions, bemoaning the agonizingly slow crawl of time and the unbearable distance he must endure to meet Akari, is him criticizing the very paradigm of the universe and the control it exerts over not just him, but also the characters of Kimi no Nawa in every Makoto Shinkai movie as well. And Takagi submitting to his worst fear, to the realization that the separation between him and Akari might never be closed, is him admitting defeat to this universe. And then there is that beautiful moment when Takaki, who had given up hope and felt utterly defeated by distance and time, arrives at the train station late at night and sees Akari still waiting for him there. Despite all his worries, despite the delays, despite the dimensions of all the universe seemingly working against him, Akari is still there. And then, standing beneath a bare cherry blossom tree, Takaki thinks to himself that, despite all the measures of distance and time looming over them, all his fears melted away with the relief of her soft lips against his. A single kiss, a single utterance of "I love you" can shatter our paradigm of the entire universe. We suddenly feel like we can break free of the measures that constrain us and soar high above the dimensions, almost like a time flyer. The beauty of Makoto Shinkai's films makes us want to watch them. Well, that's an obvious statement, but why? Why do we as viewers wish to experience beauty? Why are we so hopelessly attracted to beauty? Why do we long for, chase after, and dream of immersing our senses in inundations of beauty? What is beauty? I believe that beauty is a quality inherent to tenuity. To explain what I mean by this, there are many ways to look at beauty, and I can elaborate on how tenuity relates to each of these cases. Firstly, beauty can be seen as a symbol of merit. There is purely technical skill on display with Makoto Shinkai's photorealistic art style, his imaginative choice of landscapes, and its calculatingly placed glares of light. When we admire the artistic beauty of Makoto Shinkai's films, we are appreciating the ingenuity that realized these images and the craft that meticulously arranged them in sequence. And such a beauty is tenuous because such levels of ingenuity and craft are incredibly rare to find and should be treasured if experienced. And not just in sight, but also in sound. While 5 centimeters per second loved to tickle the heartstrings with its strikingly clear piano chords breaking many emotionally charged silences, I believe Makoto Shinkai achieved absolute mastery in the craft of musical direction when he employed radwimps to compose Kimi no no wa's soundtrack. From the opening guitar hums of Yumitoro, drawn out like strings stretched across the sky, to the energy-pumping chords of Zen Zen Zen, to the tender layering of Yojira Noda's vocals over instrumentations in Sparkle, from the dabblings of piano to the pulsating guitar strums and the swoons of strings, all working together, building up to a rapturous crescendo and the soaring sonorous highs of Nandamunaya. There is precision in choosing just the right musical dynamics to evoke the most poignant emotions, and there is a delicate, tenuous balance needed in finding that precision. The second way I view the intertwining of beauty and tenuity is in the context of grandeur. I spent much of this essay speaking about the tenuity of humanity's existence with respect to the rest of the universe. Maybe too much of this essay, but it's something I think about a lot, that I believe the subconscious of Makoto Shinkai's films also thinks about as well, about what is the purpose of humanity within the cosmos. Humanity's existence within the universe is quite tenuous. It's frightening to think of the precarious balance of conditions necessary for life to exist on our planet, and how easily a comet could strike and wipe it all away. And so, while we might initially feel helpless against the paradigm of this larger system, perhaps we should instead appreciate the beauty holding it all together. The Comet of Kimi no no wa, in my opinion, represents the grandeur of the universe. First, it is a cosmic entity coming from space, but it is also a fixture of reality in Kimi no no wa. No matter what timeline we are in, the comet will fall. It cannot be controlled. Because the comet itself splitting represents the splitting of timelines, the comet simultaneously tears Taki and Mitsuha apart with its horrifying power, but it also brings them together. Kimi no no wa cannot exist without the comet, as the comet sets in motion the events of the entire film. The comet is the grand centerpiece of Kimi no Na wa. Its imagery is ingrained into the visual identity of Kimi no Na wa. The comet is an immutable facet of the paradigm of the universe of Kimi no Na wa, and Taki and Mitsuo must learn to live with or fight back against this paradigm. The comet is named after Tiamat, a Mesopotamian deity known as the primordial goddess of the sea from whom all younger gods were birthed, and thus consequently associated not just with original creation, but also primordial chaos, how life crawling from the sea represents an eminence from a mythological void state preceding the creation of the universe. Because Comet Tiamat is indeed terrifying to behold. Its destruction of Itomoi represents the might of the universe and how easily it can reduce us to the nothingness from which we came. But I also think Makoto Shinkai chose the name Tiamat because the comet quite literally creates the events for the movie. And also there is a staggering beauty presented by the comet when we consider just how much bigger it is than us. The comet is stunningly beautiful to look at, and watching it with our own eyes, considering its 1200-year orbit and the galaxy it traversed through before meeting us here, we begin to feel very small. And it applies not just to this comet, but other natural phenomena in our world as well. But rather than live in fear of the unimaginable scope of these phenomena so overwhelming beyond our senses, perhaps we should instead appreciate how fortunate we are that our tenuous lives are able to exist within this grand design. It is a mystery to us all how the paradigm of our universe came to be, but it is beautiful to look at. This brings to mind a quote from the film where the radio describes onlookers' sentiments towards watching the comet. To be witnessing such a magnificent celestial event, that we're witnessing this live, is extremely fortunate for those of us living in this age. I'm convinced that when Makoto Shinkai wrote this quote, he was referencing not just how the characters of this film felt transfixed with awe while looking at the comet, but he also wanted to inspire a similar sense of awe in his viewers, and granting us the opportunity to witness the majesty of his artful imaginations, which is a huge flex. But I accept it. In fact, speaking of quotes regarding the comet, I want to now talk about perhaps the most important quote of the film, the quote that maybe inspired the raison d'etre of this essay, and convinced me that Kimi no Na wa is a movie fundamentally enamored with beauty. At the very beginning of this essay, I spoke at length about the opening and closing monologues, and how they were crucially important to the underlying themes that Makoto Shinkai wanted to convey. And I want to now talk about the final lines of the opening monologue of Kimi no Na wa. I'm always searching for something, for someone. This feeling has possessed me, I think, from that day. That day when the stars came falling. It was almost as if a scene from a dream. Nothing more, nothing less than a beautiful view. The summation of Makoto Shinkai's thesis of his opening monologue lies in these words. After Taki and Mitsuo lament the uncertainties of their circumstances, they can't help but relent and let their emotions melt into something more spiritual and raw when recounting the comet, equating their feelings into nothing more, nothing less than a beautiful view. I personally believe there is an intensely layered meaning to this final statement, and that these few words are the most important lines of the film. In fact, supporting evidence for why the importance of these lines cannot be understated is that they are repeated a second time, word for word, during the climax of the film, right before the magnificent crescendo of Radwim's Sparkle's soaring chorus, and right before the comet strikes Itomori. Makoto Shinkai expressly wants to establish these words as the guiding vision for his film. But what do these words mean? What sort of meaningful, elaborate vision could possibly be encapsulated in the span of just a few simple, short words? A beautiful view. As I stated near the beginning of this essay, when I first watched Kimi no Na wa, I was captivated by the images on the screen and the sonorously sweet music that accompanied them. But I couldn't quite explain what it meant. Upon hearing the characters profess their feelings for the marvelous view before them in these few simple words, I knew I was profoundly affected by this statement, but I didn't really know why. It was difficult to verbalize my reasoning, but it could be felt. And now, almost 7 years later, I feel a little more ready to answer this question. I feel like the totality of this video essay has been me trying to meticulously and comprehensively decipher what this answer meant. And maybe by the end of this essay, I will have articulated what beauty actually means and how Makoto Shinkai orchestrates it, and why this meaning was so impactful to me. The thesis of my essay is that Kimi no no wa is a movie about the tenuity of beauty. In ways, it is an answer to 5 centimeters per second and many of Makoto Shinkai's previous films, just as much as it is an answer to existing mythical legends on beauty mentioned in this essay. I spent several pages of my essay detailing the gradual buildup and release of emotions in the opening act of 5 centimeters per second, but the most obvious connection between 5 centimeters per second and Kimi no no wa lies in their endings. The opening act of 5 centimeters per second is a heartwarming window into a winter's first love, while the final act is a melancholy melody of springtime pain. And the ending of Kimi no no wa appears to be a direct callback to this ending, given the similar camera shots and emotions expressed. 5 centimeters and Kimi no no wa are similar in that for the entirety of both movies, the audience is meant to root for the reunification of the main characters. In Kimi no no wa, Taki and Mitsuha both have their own individual compelling stories, but the two actually rarely meet at all during the runtime of Kimi no no wa. Taki and Mitsuha meet only 3 different times throughout the movie, and one is just a flashback. From the opening scene, the primary dramatic tension draws from the audience yearning for both Taki and Mitsuha to meet, for both to actually recognize each other when they meet. Which is why the moment they finally meet during the brief window of twilight atop the Itomori crater is perhaps the most beautiful scene in the movie. It is a catharsis of the audience's expectations, and it is intimate, romantic, and tenuous in how short it lasts. And so the remainder of Kimi no na wa is waiting, hoping for Taki and Mitsuha to somehow reunite again. They met in Twilight, and then they lost their memories of each other in the dreamlike fog that followed. In the opening and closing monologues of Kimi no na wa see both characters rummaging their souls in the aftermath of their loss, hoping to find the something or someone who can make them whole once more. And this is where the parallel with 5 centimeters per second comes in. The first act of 5 centimeters introduces us to the endearing young romance between Takaki and Akari, and for the rest of the movie, the audience wishes to see a heartfelt reunion between the two. And at the very end of both 5 centimeters per second and Kimi no na wa, the characters do finally meet each other, and both of these fateful encounters occur on bright springtime mornings in the city of Tokyo as cherry blossoms flutter in the breeze. Quite a while ago in this essay, I asked, why does Kimi no na wa deviate from the course of his predecessors when it allows for Taki to not only bring Mitsuha back to life, but for them to also reunite happily at the end? And when I said I would answer this question in the context of an analysis of one more Makoto Shinkai film, which was 5 centimeters per second, and I will finally more directly answer that question now. At the ending of both films, Taki and Takaki mirror each other in that they are both listless, jobless, somewhat disillusioned male adults wandering through life in Tokyo, and at the center of both their struggles is a quiet suffering from loss. 5 centimeters per second is a bittersweet film about accepting loss and moving on from a relationship where love has faded. Throughout the movie, Takaki holds on to a dream of still being together with Akari, and given how anime tropes usually go, the audience might be led to expect this dream to be fulfilled. But a consistent theming I noticed in Makoto Shinkai's films is that, while Shinkai honors beauty in many of his films, he does not wish to embellish this beauty beyond the reason of lived experience. It would be irresponsible to disservice the audience in such a way. A common criticism I've seen of Makoto Shinkai is that the perspective of his films are often too narrow, but what I see is a director trying to write stories that are a reflection of his own reality, imperfect as it may be. And in 5 centimeters per second, I believe that Makoto Shinkai wants to tell his own personal truth that maybe he experienced in his own love life, an observation of an imminent mortality inherent to even the most blossoming of beauties. Basically, I just want to say that Makoto Shinkai makes sad movies. Like the tales of Orpheus and Eurydice and Izanagi and Izanami before it, 5 centimeters per second emulates a tragedy told in legend since time immemorial. Love is ephemeral, fleeting, and mortal, and to pretend otherwise would only be a futile, sorrowful endeavor. Orpheus and Izanagi were unable to revive their lost loved ones, just as Takaki irrevocably lost his. So, what about Kimi no no wa then? Why is Kimi no no wa different? In a way, one can argue that Kimi no no wa is actually no different from these previous tales, because Taki and Mitsuha share no memory of each other. When they meet each other at the end of the film, it is no different from meeting any other stranger. The mortality of Taki and Mitsuha's previous relationship is still intact, and any future correspondence between the two is now with a separate new entity. If you think about it, the probability of meeting a specific stranger from the millions of Japanese citizens inhabiting Tokyo is so small that this encounter was never meant to be realistic. Instead, Taki and Mitsuha meeting a second time can be interpreted as a metaphor for finding a new, different love after a previous love was lost. And in this sense, the message of 5 centimeters per second is upheld, as Taki and Mitsuha are no longer clinging to this vague, indescribable loss in their hearts, and are instead ready to start anew with this other person they just met. But Taki and Mitsuha are still each other. Taki is still Taki, and Mitsuha is still Mitsuha, regardless of memories lost. What about all that talk I gave about the persistence of identity in the universe? So, there is an intention in keeping Mitsuha alive and allowing for her and Taki to reunite. But why? Well, it's happier. A very long time ago in this essay, I asked, why is Yumatoro called Dream Lantern despite never mentioning dream or lantern in its lyrics? And I have been extremely roundabout in giving a final answer. Well, I figure now is as good a time as any to tie up loose ends. The opening lyrics of Yumatoro play just after Taki and Mitsuha narrate their opening monologue, comparing the beautiful view they saw to a scene from a dream. At the beginning of this essay, I mentioned a poem about dreams written by Ono no Komachi that Makoto Shinkai has stated taking inspiration from. In fact, Makoto Shinkai was so inspired by this poem that the original title for Kimi no no wa was actually going to be Yume to Shireseba, or If I Knew It Was a Dream. Anyways, I'll repeat an excerpt from Ono no Komachi's poem here. Had I known it was a dream, I should never have awakened.
大事にしないよ。夢は目覚めればいつか消える。
This quote from Grandma Miyamizu is actually one of my inspirations for my realization that I wanted to write about the tenuity of beauty in Kimi no no wa, much like the tenuity of dreams. But her statement also contradicts the desire expressed by Ono no Komachi in her poem. What if we could perpetually dream? Reading the lyrics of Yumatoro, the singer wishes that his voice could reach the very edge of the world in time instead of fading into air and dust. A desire that runs adverse to our apparent mortality in the universe. Taki and Mitsuha wish to remember the someone they have since forgotten. This someone or something that feels reminiscent of a dream because, unbeknownst to them, they used to visit each other in their dreams. I mentioned near the beginning of my essay that dreams are often used as vehicles for the supernatural in storytelling. But more generally, I believe they encompass the realm of things we can't quite understand. Much like how the indefinite confines of the universe are beyond our natural comprehension, dreams contain an endless number of possibilities we can perceive, and somewhere within these possibilities also lie our innermost, most intimate desires. Kimi no wa, I think, does a fantastic job of representing what it's like to wake up from an incredibly vivid dream, but then immediately lose all memory of it within seconds of waking up. It explains why Taki and Mitsuha forget each other's names so quickly. But even when we can't remember the events that happen in our dreams, what often still lingers are the emotions we might have felt during our dreams. Whether it be fear or joy or a deep sense of a longing, the emotional effect of a dream may continue to rest in our subconscious well after we wake up and into the rest of our day. Perhaps the title Dream Lantern means wishing for the ability to illuminate and untangle this dreamlike fog we can't quite understand and the emotions we felt, and in turn, actualize it into reality. A dream lantern would help guide Taki and Mitsuha walk through their dreams and eventually find each other. The desire to illuminate one's dreams, or the desire to perpetually dream, these are not things that can actually exist in our reality. But art is not limited by the rules of reality. I've been thinking recently about how art as a concept goes against our natural tendency towards mortality, a presumption that most things should follow in our reality. The intention of art is to preserve an artist's vision behind paper, screen, or glass and ensure it lasts for perpetuity. Conversely, I've spent over an hour of this video essay speaking about how we as humans are limited by the confines of our reality due to our mortality and because of the paradigm of the universe. But art defies that expectation. Earlier in this essay, I wrote that when I make note of the tenuity of beauty, I did not want to make note of only its fragility, but instead also highlight a hidden, more resilient underlying quality found in tenuity. This quality, I think, is present in moments like when Takaki and Akari shared their first kiss in a snowfield, or when Taki and Mitsuha shared a laugh in Twilight while the aurora-like comet trails passed overhead, or when Taki and Mitsuha both ran through the streets of Tokyo looking for each other as Nanda Monaya played at the end of the film. Nanda Monaya meaning never mind in English, because the lyrics of Nanda Monaya acknowledge the constraints of the world, but instead just say, never mind to all that, insisting on pushing forward. When we have emotionally charged experiences, emotions often override our logic and make us feel like we can overcome anything. Because when we feel something, it is difficult for any measure to quantify emotions because emotions are indescribable. And when something is indescribable or unknown, we can insert our most personally affecting meaning, and then it becomes limitless. And that is how art, by utilizing these emotions, also becomes limitless. I think the reason why Makoto Shinkai chose to have Taki and Mitsuha meet at the end of the film is because I think he was tired of making sad films mired in cumbersome reality. He wanted to create something more optimistic, more hopeful, even if it wasn't realistic, because what better purpose can art serve than to illuminate even our most impossible dreams? Maybe the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami was a breaking point for him. Maybe he just wanted to try something new. But the lives lost in natural disasters cannot be recovered in real life. The girl who left you isn't coming back. And that indescribable ache you can't explain when you wake up crying in the morning, maybe it won't ever go away. But never mind all that. Searching for those brief moments of escape when we feel like anything is possible, that to me is the tenuity of beauty.
二人の間通り過ぎた風はどこから寂しさを運んできたの泣いたりしたその後の空はやけに透き通っていたりしたんだ
To end this essay, I'm going to talk less about Kimi no Na wa and more about a very personal story as to why I wrote this essay. If you listened up to this point, I am beyond grateful that you have already given me so much of your time. So, if you will indulge me for just a little bit longer, I'd like to explain how this essay came to be and what it represents to me. Almost a year ago, in March of 2022, I went to Alaska. I posted a couple YouTube videos about it, and this might sound kind of dumb, but one of the reasons I decided rather abruptly to go to Alaska was because I recently stopped talking to a girl I liked, and as a result, I wanted to vamoose it to the coldest, darkest, most remote place I could think of that was also still somewhat affordable for a last-minute trip. And also, it was close to my birthday. But yes, that's why I went to Alaska, and I also went by myself. And during this trip, I planned on seeing the Aurora Borealis. I feel like that's on a lot of people's bucket lists, and like the cultured anime enthusiast I was, I knew that I was going to listen to the Radwimp soundtracks on my headphones while watching the Aurora, and pretend I'm looking at a comet like in Kimi no Na wa. And the night of the scheduled Aurora gazing, I rode in these giant snowcat machines taking us to the very top of a mountain. And when we reached the summit, there were no lights, so it was pitch black dark, because it was already past midnight. And also, it was under 10 degrees Fahrenheit, or negative degrees Celsius, if I have any non-American viewers. But yeah, as you can see, it was very cold and dark. In fact, if I could describe it, it was probably the most profoundly solitary experience I had ever felt in my life, standing alone at the top of a remote mountain in the middle of Alaska, shivering in darkness. But anyways, the auroras eventually did come, and initially they were faint. Usually auroras will never be so bright as to actually appear on any standard phone video footage you might take, and will only appear in long exposure photos. But even so, the photos I did take were really awesome. I was absolutely enthralled with the idea of seeing any amount of color in the sky. But then, around 2:30 a.m., something stupidly amazing happened. As you can see, there was a surge of brightness bursting across the sky, and it was so strikingly clear that you could see it this vividly on my iPhone video footage. My tour guide who was with us told us that in his 30 or so years of living in Alaska, this night alone was perhaps one of the best views of the Aurora Borealis he had ever seen. And yes, it was by far the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. And in that moment, standing beneath the auroras and the stars, listening to the Radwimps play in my ears, I felt like for the rest of my life, I wanted to keep searching for beautiful moments like this, to never stop looking, and never stop trying to experience as much beauty as I possibly can in this world. And it was also during this night that I realized that I wanted to make a video about Kimi no Na wa. Later, after coming home from Alaska, I decided that I was going to change jobs. And so until about May, I practiced for interviews, and eventually I got a job offer as a software engineer from Google. This might sound a little corny to some, but for many years, ever since I started studying computer science, one of my biggest goals was to eventually work for Google. I felt like this was a company that attracted the brightest talent, offered some of the best perks, and so when I got the offer in May of 2022, I was really happy. After that, it was in June of 2022 that I first created the document to start writing this essay for Kimi no Na wa. Yes, you heard that right. June of 2022. I have been working on this video essay for over 8 months. But it's not like I was working every single hour of every single day during the past 8 months on this essay. I had a whole other actual job I should be working at. And life is busy, and I mostly only worked on this essay during the weekends. But also, I am a very slow writer. I am an extremely slow writer. I could spend hours writing and rewriting the same sentence over and over, obsessing and becoming frustrated over trying to get just the right rhythm or consonant texture in a sentence, while also trying to imbue some sort of vague meaning into it that I wasn't even too sure myself actually was. Because yeah, if some of you haven't gleaned this already, but most of this essay isn't really about Kimi no Na wa. I mean, it kinda is, but I also think a lot of this essay is just me talking about random things in life and then trying to relate it to Kimi no Na wa afterwards. In fact, if I had to summarize it, it felt like searching for meaning in Kimi no Na wa was starting to feel like I was searching for meaning in various circumstances of my own life at the same time. Because, yeah. On January 20th of this year, I was part of the layoffs announced by Google, exactly 6 months after I was hired. For anyone unaware, to provide context, the tech industry as a whole has been laying off thousands of workers in 2022 through 2023 due to fears of a recession and overestimates in hiring during the coronavirus pandemic. And that moment really impressed on me the tenuity of my existence and of all the things I think I know. And it motivated me to finally finish this essay. And as you can see, I think about life a lot. And at the time of writing this essay, I am single, jobless, and adrift in the universe. But over the several months I've written this essay, I've thought about the first time I watched Kimi no Na wa years ago. I've thought about the days I spent with a girl I once liked, and I've thought about the night I spent beneath the aurora and the stars. I've thought about all the time I spent walking on this earth until I reached where I am right now. I've reflected on all the things I've learned, the people I've met, and the places I've been, and how brief it all actually was within the expanse of the entire universe. And I've realized it all really was nothing more, nothing less than a beautiful view.
君がくれた